right. As we get our next round of speakers up on the stage, just a quick introduction of what we'll be speaking with. We'll be talking about stewardship for healthy watersheds with Billy Tarrant, who's the interim director of Meadows Research Institute for West Texas Water here at Sul Ross, and Price Rumbelow, the conservation delivery coordinator at Rio Grande Joint Venture. I did also just want to really quick take a poll of the audience. How many of y'all are from this area out there? Okay, pretty great. And from other parts of Texas? Awesome. Great. It's a great crowd. I also did want to say, I call this the real West Texas, right? We have a few West Texases, but this is the real one. I would agree. All right, Billy and Price, come on up.
Now? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, stewardship for healthy watersheds. Billy, you want to get us started and just
we just talked about this. Maybe yourself? A quick introduction to us. Billy Tarrant. I'm wearing two hats right now. As the interim director for the Meadows Research Institute for West Texas Water, as well as the Center for Land Stewardship and Stakeholder Engagement, because I can't stand a short title for anything that I do. I guess. That's under Borderlands Research Institute. And before that, I spent 23 years with Texas Parks and Wildlife as a wildlife biologist and in administration as well. So, been out here for almost all that entire period.
And I'm Price Rumbelow. I'm Conservation Delivery Coordinator for the Rio Grande Joint Venture. I've been with Rio Grande Joint Venture since 2023. Prior to that, I was working for Texas Parks and Wildlife, state parks, working on regional conservation delivery work, just at the 19 parks that are in far West Texas here. But I've been in Alpine for 17 years and am a graduate of Sul Ross State University, actually, BRI for my master's.
And by the way, just because we both came from Parks and Wildlife doesn't mean to our Parks and Wildlife friends out there, we enjoyed working for Parks and Wildlife. We just took a different path.
That's a good point. Yeah. So the Borderlands Research Institute and Rio Grande Joint Venture came together in a partnership. Billy, you want to?
Yeah, so with this partnership, really two different things happened. We were able to work with our friends at Parks and Wildlife and obtain some funding to assist landowners through the Trans-Pecos Grasslands and Riparian Conservation Initiative. Once again, nothing short. We got to make it long. And that was several $1 million that we're able to partner with landowners and get a lot of grassland restoration work done, so a lot of riparian restoration work done, fence modifications for pronghorn, some of our more important things that we think are important for wildlife in the Trans-Pecos. At about the same time, we were approached by our friends at the Dixon Water Foundation and the Horizon Foundation, thank you, Robert Potts, about this Alameda Creek Conservation Initiative, and that's capacity only. That's some funding that they've provided us to really ramp up work along Alameda Creek and the tributaries of Alameda Creek, utilizing the funds from the Trans-Pecos Grasslands and Riparian Conservation Initiative and other federal funding that we have to get work done out there on the ground.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about ACCI later. But this is actually when I came to RGJV. I was hired under this to work 50% on the larger TPGRCI and also the ACCI. So watershed health begins with grasslands. Here in the U.S., we like to call them watersheds. Water catchment area, I think, is a good way to get it in your brain, kind of the picture that we're looking for, though, which is just to say that as that water falls, everything accumulates down into a stream, and so where the water falls is the watershed or water catchment area.
Yeah, and this picture, I just think one of the things to think about is if a half inch of rain fell in this area, which land type is going to hold that water better, and which one's going to get more moisture in the soil, and which one's going to allow it to run off more. So something to think about.
Yeah, and I'd also like to point out in this picture here that, on the left-hand side, we can see that it's been grazed recently or fairly recently. We can also see that there's a large number of creosote in the picture. But what you can maybe look a little deeper, and you can see that there's still a lot of grass crowns following this grazing. There's not a lot of bare ground. An area like this would respond really well to a treatment, and this area on the right has been treated, and you can see that the response over time. So I think one thing that, we might talk about this more, but I just want to make a point here is if you take medicine, the doctor will say take medicine and then get bed rest. You know, you can't just give the landscape some medicine and then ask it to respond overnight. So following treatment, this area on the left is going to require a little bit of rest as well, you know. But it would be a good candidate for treatment. And so I guess I'll just jump into kind of grassland restoration in general and why that matters. The central grasslands of the United States and North America, you know, from Canada down to Mexico, has been in decline. We've seen about a 60% reduction in those grasslands over the past 50 years.
Which has impacted, obviously, a lot of our bird populations, especially down here. Our wintering grassland bird populations have lost a lot of their habitat for winter, and that's a big issue. I will say that this is one of the things that we work on, where we actually align a lot with our rancher conservationists, our landowners. If you're growing grass for wildlife, you're also growing grass for production for cattle, and it's something that we see eye to eye on a lot. I think we see eye to eye on just about everything we do with our rancher partners, but it's just one point I wanted to make.
Yeah, and again, I was trying to be kind of, you know, with these pictures, I'm really trying to do double duty here, and so I just want to point out that these large intact grasslands benefit a specific suite of species. Pronghorn are a really great flagship, you know, species for that. But the scale quail, I think, is good also just to recognize that as you get into those more desert grasslands and desert shrublands, there's really good benefit to managing those properly. And the scale quail can often be kind of a poster child for those habitats too.
Or you might have some beneficial brush as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Beneficial brush species, and maybe an end result that you're looking for that's not a grass-dominated system, but, you know, one where there's a mosaic of shrubs and grasses. But those large intact grasslands are quite critical for especially that suite of birds. So we have a lot of different management tools in the tool belt. Here's just some quick photographs which show some of the differences in ways that we go after things. On the left, you see the more of kind of a brush sculpting implement, which is your large excavator. This is great for plucking those species out kind of one at a time. And then also to aerial application, larger swaths. Out here, that's typically going to be like a tebuthyron treatment, which is great for woody brush encroachment. But then we also get into some soil surface manipulation. Branch mulch, you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, that's something that's probably new to a lot of folks, but that's basically where you do have the opportunity to utilize some, say you're doing brush management and you have quite a bit of woody branches and sticks and leaves and stuff that you can put on the soil surface. We got a lot of examples out here. Just actually on the Miller Ranch over in Valentine, they've just done that with the cuttings from the yard, and it just completely haired over several acres over the years. Where you put that stuff, that branch mulch on the ground, you're not creating a mulch. You just has some loft to it. It provides protection from herbivory, from rabbits or cattle or whatever it may be. It also provides a little microclimate, keeps the soil cooler, allows for germination, holds moisture longer. Works like a charm. As you can see, it's very effective. It's just very hard to scale it up is the problem.
Yeah, that's true. And in some cases, I would just say that this is going to be really beneficial because it has that low impact to the ground and to the surrounding system. So very friable, very fragile soils. This branch mulch on top can help to shade and encourage the grass growth. And in some cases, where you do have kind of a more robust soil, we have done things like chiseling, which is, you can see at the back of that dozer there, a picture of a chisel. We've done some things with a roller diker, which is another way of kind of creating cups in the soil. We've monitored these sites post-treatment. You know, we try to be adaptive in our management strategies and what we're helping to prescribe. We've seen some really great response in this, although just pointing out that, you know, in a really friable, really fragile soil, you might not want to go in with something as big as this. And that gets us kind of to adaptive grazing strategies.
Yeah, we talked about this slide before. You know, obviously there's different type of grazing strategies, and one of the things I think that people need to remember out here is that it's not a one-size-fits-all usually. We do like to see a lot of rotational grazing, but one of my good friends ranches really well and has been a very good manager. He uses the term adaptive rotational grazing because as we mentioned in the first session, the size of our ranches are so big that if you've got a ranch that gets 15 inches of rain on this end and 8 inches of rain on this end this year, you may need to adapt a little bit. And it can't be set in stone like it can be where you often where you see a higher rainfall regime.
And one thing that we've tried to do is bring some funding to the area for actually replacing old pilas. The NRCS is great at this, and and working with landowners to update their water systems. But I would just like to take a second to point out that pila there, that was a replacement. You can just barely see the old pila in the picture. Evaporative loss out of that old pila was estimated at 60,000 gallons annually. So you don't even take into account the fact that these old pilas leak, which we know that they do. But then once you replace it, the downstream impacts still keep going. So the cleanliness of the water that has not grown algae because it's been sitting in this tank. There's the downstream effects. So this is something that we're really excited about, and with all of these things, if any of it piques your interest, please find us at the tables out here, and we can talk more about.
And that's something we'd like to seek funding for too, is assist landowners uncovering pilas if we could.
Absolutely. So generally speaking, for watershed restoration health, everything needs water, and erosion leads to soil loss, which decreases your utilization potential for the available water that you have. Jared Schneers actually told me it takes about 1,000 years to regain 1 inch of soil loss under natural conditions. We do try to implement strategies that interrupt these kind of negative feedback loops, these processes, and increase those soil gains over time. But it's much easier to keep the soil in place in the beginning than it is to put it back.
And this picture here of this loose rock structure that was put in by a landowner or a rancher out here. That after about a year, you can see how much soil has accumulated, how it's holding moisture and growing vegetation, which otherwise that soil would have been lost on downstream. And that's one of the biggest things we do, and we'll talk more about that.
So yeah, as that erosion happens, what's happening? So streams are constantly eroding and depositing soils, but when that gets out of whack and erosion is happening faster than the stream can deposit those soils out of solution, downcutting occurs. And with downcutting, you basically are leaving the stream sides stranded, and that water table will follow that lowest point. You see this all the time. You'll see a dry creek. The sides of the creek will be very dry, devoid of grass, and maybe mesquite will be the one species that's hanging on. They have that long taproot, and they're able to reach down and get that water, versus a functioning system, which is kind of pictured over here on the side.
A lot of reasons for that over the years, but you can imagine a lot of our streams out here historically 150 years ago had a lot of riparian vegetation, a lot of trees, and most of that was harvested for use, and that really started accelerating this process, and now it's become a big issue.
Yeah. So some benefits of mitigation to that, again, you just interrupt those negative feedback loops and those processes that are leading to that drying out. Pictured here is a beaver dam analog that we put in on the floodplain of Olympia Creek. So Olympia Creek itself, it was kind of too big of a bear to tackle. With a big flood event, we figured any of our structures would get washed out. But getting up onto the floodplain, we built this into a little side channel. And this should encourage the restoration of that cottonwood gallery forest, which should come back in over time with a little bit of help. We're actually doing some cottonwood plantings as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about the benefits of
what I was going to say. Yeah, the two things real quick. By beginning to restore that natural process, rebuild the floodplain, put more vegetation out there. Sometimes we get a lot of questions about these projects and what's the lifespan and how long do they last. I want to be fair and say that it really depends upon the situation. Sometimes you're so far down cut you may have to come back and do another round of them. But typically, if they do require maintenance, if we do have some, especially the rock structures, require some maintenance. So you may have to do some maintenance. But the idea here is not to sit there and keep doing this. The idea is that you're going to manage that resource good, and it's going to come back on its own. And so we're not we're just giving the stream the medicine that it needs to heal itself. And once it's healed, it's forever, right? Our work is done. So that's one thing about the longevity. And then the idea that the trees, it's kind of counterintuitive. A lot of folks think that you have cottonwoods and willows, that they're sucking water out, and you can get more water flow by getting rid of those trees, and that's actually never been proven by research. It's exact opposite. Through shading during the most driest, hardest time of the year, the summer and early spring, that's when they do their best job and slow down evapotranspiration off that creek. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, but just to kind of point at it, they're shedding those limbs later that is going to be providing the woody debris that's going to create these natural processes to be a messy creek, slow that water down naturally, long term. So this is kind of a fun picture here.
It's pretty busy.
It's a little busy. It just kind of points to the fact that, like, where you're at in the watershed, there's different solutions, for how much water that you're dealing with, and what kind of a system that you're looking at. We've built some of these, and so I have some pictured over there. The leaky weirs, which is right there at the top, that's the picture that's here, and I just want to point out that thing is full, and we've caught all of the sediment that one's going to capture, and that took 2 days. 2 days. That was installed, and 2 days later we got the rain event last July that filled this thing in with sediment. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty shocking to think how much soil is being removed from our hillsides, especially right now. Following dry periods, the soils are very unsaturated. It's very prone to these flash events, removing that top layer of sediment. And so getting these structures in place during these dry periods sets you up for success when that rain does come. But as you move down, there's a lot of different techniques, trincheras, which BRI's had success with at 9 Point Mesa. We've got beaver dam analogs. Y'all got a look at kind of what that looks like. Brush weirs, gabions, earthen berms. None of this stuff is new. It's not.
Yeah, I'm going to mention in a minute how seems novel to a lot of folks, and the fact of the matter is it's been going on for thousands of years with Native Americans in Central America and Mexico, and it's just now that we're starting to realize how much application we can have here.
Yeah, and we took this watershed level approach, and we'd like y'all to think on watershed levels with us. But the Alameda Creek Conservation Initiative, I'll just say, it really allowed us to do that. It gave us the momentum that we needed to take these projects outside of just the Alameda Creek watershed, but we stay committed to the Alameda Creek watershed and improving this on a watershed level scale. Yeah. Okay, so for y'all unfamiliar, the Alameda Creek watershed, there's Marfa there in the center of it. It comes from Jeff Davis County, go all the way over to Brewster County and down to the Rio Grande. It's about 1,000 square miles of area there.
Within that area, we're focusing on certain areas that have a better chance at restoration. A lot of y'all have seen some of these areas where we just still have some riparian gallery of cottonwoods. We're focusing those areas. They are impacted, but they have a quicker chance of recovery than maybe some other areas.
Yeah, and the Alameda Creek is a great example of that, just as a whole, because in this area, in the Trans-Pecos, I actually worked on a project in 2019 with Inland Fisheries doing a fish survey in Alameda Creek, and we got fish. So
not now we don't.
Yeah, and that drying trend that we saw, and that local drying trend in the last 5 years has really impacted that. But again, I think that now is the time to go ahead and do the work to be ready for when we start to get that rain.
Absolutely. That's it. I think we covered everything, didn't we?
Pretty good.
Any questions? Trey. So the two questions are, is there a plan to move outside the Alameda Creek watershed once we feel like we've really addressed it, and then what's the biggest obstacles? Yes, there is a plan. That is, we kind of would like to hopefully use, here's the deal. I mean, if we do this right, well, I didn't mention this before, but one of the first things you're going to see, if we can hit an entire, a pretty large watershed, is year-round running water, or at least long periods of running water in creeks that typically have water in them for about 4 or 5 hours right now. We could get that water up. That makes an impact, right? When you could see clear running water for a long period of time, that makes an impact. So we're using those areas as demonstration sites and really try to catalyze the movement forward. I'd say the biggest obstacle is, first of all, understanding we don't want to just utilize our funding sources. We would love to have ranchers, we've got a program now where we're just going to come help set up a couple of them by hand. And if you see the results, hopefully we can work with you, or if we can't, maybe you can do it yourself too, right? That's the idea. But funding probably in the future is going to be one of our biggest ones if we're doing this from a landowner assistance standpoint, because right now we're really incentivizing this quite a bit to get it catalyzed and moving. So,
yeah, I would agree with what Billy said. It's been, our strategy to try to get people to see these structures, see them in place, see how well they can work, and then hopefully they'll start to adopt these practices. But also funding for these, and I would say that one of the big wins for funding is that the NRCS of Texas has now got a funding code for these. It's the second year that that's in place. They're still working with their on-the-ground offices for kind of how to best roll these practices out. But the NRCS, they've got the deepest pockets probably out of anybody, right? So once those these practices become more accepted, yeah, by the NRCS, I think that's going to be huge.
Am I on? Understanding that every site is site-specific.
Hold it closer to your mouth.
Understanding that every site is site-specific to each method of conservation. What's the theory on possibly, instead of spraying or grubbing mesquite, just mowing it down, and that would be true of the greasewood also, and creating that biomass on the top, and then as it grows back, you just mow it again and create more biomass? Would that be a concept that'd be worthy?
The question was, instead of treating mesquite and creosote, possibly mow it, leave that biomass on the ground. When it grows back, mow it again. I'm not familiar with any. You aware of anybody that's done that? I know mowing it in the borrow ditch doesn't seem to work as far as killing it. They sure come back pretty mad. Mesquite does, but I don't know. It's something to look at. Thank you, Ira. I mean, possibly. At some point, you'd want to treat it. If it grows more grass, treat it at some point. I don't know.
The only location I can think of off the top of my head is out front of San Angelo State Park, where they have a mowing regime, and those mesquites are healthy. But there's a little bit more water annually there as well, so that grassland seems to respond under that mowing pressure. I would worry about soil compaction. Would be kind of my knee-jerk out here. I think Dr. Warnock told me once, if you drive over it twice, it's a road. So,
yes.
Hi. I have a question about the beaver dam analogs that you're using, and I don't know the rainfall patterns out here super well, but my sense is that they kind of come sporadically and, a lot being relative, but at a time. Are they holding up to, you build them and then the rain kind of comes in the rain season? Are they holding up well? Are you having to do something different to design them?
we've had success with the ones that we've installed. We try to pick the right tool for the place that we're at, and so we look at that water catchment area above it, and we also look at the slope at the site that we're at. Where we've had failures as well, we've tried to learn from those. And so I would say that, the biggest failures that we've seen was maybe because the soil substrate that we set our posts in was a little bit more of a loose gravel. And so the whole thing kind of just became a soup, and then we lost the structural integrity from our posts. Typically, we've had pretty good success with them. And we expect those to to live long enough to kind of do their job and then be built out of natural materials and things that the stream can process. And so that way, when you do lose a structure, it kind of just gets incorporated into that natural woody debris.
I will say that part of what we've done is try to scale up and figure out how to do this at a commercial level. In other words, not just using what's available to us out there, but I mean, actually for rock structures, purchasing rock, getting a better understanding of what that's going to cost, what it's going to cost to move it. For example, with our BDAs or any log structures, one of the things we've looked at is utilizing commercially available stuff like cedar stays, cedar posts, stuff like that, and seems to be working pretty well. And it gives us an idea what the cost is, a much better idea what the cost is.
Hi, guys. You came down to our place where we have Calamity, where it looks like a river. And, some places 40 feet deep. And you talked about the possibility of diverting it with what you were just saying, big rocks to make it curve and slow it down and add vegetation behind those areas that might actually grow and not be blown out by a big rain. Can you talk any more about that part?
Yeah, it's a big step for us, right? We're working in smaller watersheds right now, and that's so far down the Calamity Creek watershed. It's possible, but it's one of those things we have, unfortunately, don't have the funding for right now. But it's one that we'll probably have to try it. We really, with the idea is you start at the top of the watershed, start slowing it down, and as you come down in these bigger, flashier, spicier systems, that we've got the water already slowed down enough that we can make an impact there without having to go that large scale. But we can certainly visit with you again to see if we can't try to figure something out.
Yeah, and that's induced meander. If you look at the papers on induced meander, you'll get an idea for that. And we have a little bit of experience with that. But I think it is important that we focus our efforts, on these watersheds, because they build off of each other. If you start to slow the water, and then you get the water under control, and then versus kind of starting in the middle. And so, not to say that we're not going to work there, but we're not there yet, maybe.
So we're still learning. Vanessa?
Okay, so I was curious if y'all could talk a little bit more about the connection between these land restoration strategies, soil moisture, and aquifer health. I thought it was interesting what Dr. Nielsen Gammon said about out here in West Texas, we may in the future not necessarily have more droughts, but they're going to be hotter. And so it seems like that will potentially wreak havoc on soil moisture. So do you see these types of strategies addressing that? And maybe it seems like they're even more necessary now or more necessary in the future than they have been.
I'll say real quick, Vanessa, I think that first of all, as we build these structures, we are, in theory, directly impacting the riparian aquifer for sure, right? That's trying to bring, people have seen that, these really shallow wells in the middle of a creek, next to a creek that you can't imagine they tapped into water. They tapped into water maybe 2 feet down back in the day when these were functioning. Now, the deeper aquifers, that's a question that I think, are you guys looking at that now in the Davis Mountains or no? Possibly?
Yeah, we're kind of taking a stab at. We're really mainly interested in the bird habitat response, kind of right there on the surface, but we are teaming up with other partners that are interested in that deep aquifer and maybe what is that connection. But right now, I will say that the question is, how do you look at that connection? Yeah, versus what is the response. We're still in the stage where we're trying to figure that out, and I think it's okay for me to say it's that we're working with Edwards Aquifer Authority, who has a lot of experience in measuring, aquifer recharge, and they're saying, well, y'all have more structures. Let us come look at some of your structures, and we'll start to get at, how do we measure that? So that impact to the deeper aquifer, it's a hard nut to crack.
Well, and it's something obviously from the Water Institute's going to be, Meadows Research Institute for West Texas Water is going to be very interested in. I see both of my hats teaming up on some of this as well moving forward. And
I should mention, Kevin Urbanzik and the Meadows Research Institute are also involved in that. So working towards that. But I think definitely in the drier climate, this water banking, trying to get more water into the soil, into the plants, and stop it from just shedding off of the watershed is more important.
What, time? I guess that's last question.
I was wondering what kind of measured or quantitative recoveries have you seen after implementing these structures, like after events?
Yeah, so we started measuring about 2 seasons ago. So we've seen some initial riparian plant response. We're doing avian surveys as well with ARUs and spring point counts.
Acoustic recording.
Acoustic recording
units.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going after a bunch of suite of measurements, and I should just say that, you know, when it rains, we all look like good managers, and so at the end of last monsoon season, we were looking in a lot better shape than we were the prior year.
Thank y'all very, very much.